Everybody loves a good conspiracy theory, right? Claims about how the moon is fake, about how many cryptids that roam the earth. Pepe Silvia, and usually talking about theories is how you create bigger and more outlandish theories.
It was perfect.
Because there's nothing like a collaborative effort in making weird ideas.
Huh?
But let's look at a smaller scope. Cartoons. Everybody loves cartoons, probably.
So funny, is it?
And the only thing better than watching cartoons is obsessing over the deeper meanings behind the cartoon. There are plenty of theories floating around about the shows we watch. Some mundane, some off the wall, some fucking bonkers. Personally, I don't really buy into that many of the theories floating around, not unless they're backed up by, some hard, substantial evidence. It's just mighty interesting to watch and consider maybe that's true. But let's talk about some of the many, many, many theories that are out there in the world of cartoons. Good old Charlie Brown. Everyone's favorite blockhead, whether it's from the classic Peanuts comic strips or the animated specials generations of families watch every holiday season. There's hardly a soul alive who doesn't know Chuck. But, as it turns out, he supposedly has a common thread with an unlikely source. The preschool cartoon character Caillou. So what exactly connects an unlucky grade schooler with the colorful and frequently bratty preschooler, at least according to the theories? Cancer. Yeah, I was surprised too. I mean, it seems rather dark to imply children in cartoons have a high terminal disease that requires going through chemotherapy treatments, hence why both of them are bald apparently. It could also explain some of their strongest personality traits, with Charlie Brown, especially pensive and filled with self-doubt and self-loathing. Caillou, meanwhile, acts particularly bratty, even for a child his age, which may be a part of his psychological effects of going through the treatment off screen, chemotherapy. Tough. How would any kid hope to fully comprehend what's happening though? As far as whether this theory holds weight, who fucking knows? I can't confirm or deny Caillou's case. I'm not his doctor. I didn't write the show. Since there's no proof to the contrary, and considering how the show's general layout includes a white frame that seems to fade, it could almost be like a flashback. When it comes to Charlie Brown, however, there's a major piece of evidence against it, namely that cancer was both directly discussed and focused on. There was a whole special dedicated to Linus learning about cancer, one of the rarer and least talked about specials of the franchise for a number of reasons. Key to the argument against the theory is that Linus is learning about cancer not from his friend Charlie, but from a young girl who actually has it and is experiencing the mental treatment it entails. If Charlie also had it, why wouldn't have Linus picked up on that? It's not like those two don't talk that often. Surely it would have been a bigger focus before that special if it was so important. On the whole, the theory's debunked, but primarily only on one side of it. Theory number 2. SpongeBob and the 7 Deadly Sins. Not the anime, the Bible sins. This one's kinda weird, but apparently people believe the residents of Bikini Bottom are related to the 7 sins. Pride, gluttony, wrath, greed, lust, sloth, and envy. Those ones. And personally, I just don't see it. It seems a bit nonsensical for such a comparison to be made by a marine biologist. Now if it was Butch Hartman, maybe. Still, for the sake of discussion, let's play along. There are 7 sins, corresponding with the main cast. Of course, this includes SpongeBob himself, Patrick, Squidward, Mr. Krabs, Gary, Sandy, and Plankton. For this theory to work, every character needs to be represented by one sin, and even if one sin is lacking, it falls apart. I'll grant, Patrick could be gluttony, Mr. Krabs could be greed, his cheap ass, Plankton envy, and Squidward pride. That would make 4. What about the rest? Gary's a snail, doesn't really do too much typically, except for urgent situations. I mean, you could say he represents sloth, but that's a stretch. That leaves 2 more characters, and here's where things get messy. For whatever fucking reason, SpongeBob is lust. This is just bizarre for a number of reasons. Never mind that sponges in nature are asexual creatures, something I'm sure Hillenburg knew perfectly. The simple fact is, in 25 years of this show, SpongeBob has never shown any romantic interest in another character. Some ship teasing with Sandy, and some interesting interaction with Squidward, but nothing direct, and nothing beyond a joke for about maybe 10 seconds. In fact, he doesn't represent any sin. He's not prideful, he's not gluttonous, he's about as far from wrathful as you possibly can be. He's content with his simple life, so he's not envious, he's always active and thus not sloth, and he seems to have such a low value or understanding of money that he actively gives it away on numerous occasions, so greed is out too. So already that fast, that theory's a bust. But let's be thorough. Where does Sandy fit into that picture? An argument could be made about her prideful nature, sure, but Squidward is more consistently prideful himself. Can't have more than one sin. And the point was to have all 7 characters represented by 7 different sins, not the same one copied and pasted. Every character except SpongeBob fits more than one, all depending on the role of funny and the plot. It's impossible to pin down the exact sin, so this theory's debunked. But number 3, there is no Krabby Patty secret formula. Speaking of SpongeBob, since we're still on the topic, what's even in that secret formula bottle that Mr. Krabs keeps so heavily guarded? Is it the recipe for the Krabby Patty? Or is it just a contract of the current fry cook? He could just be too cheap to buy ingredients. Plus, he could be using Plankton's repeated failed attempts as a big marketing campaign. I'll admit the idea of there being no secret ingredient at all would be an interesting twist, kinda like Kung Fu Panda, but it doesn't really make too much sense when you think about it. It sounds interesting on paper, having a burger so good that it doesn't need anything special to make it good, just the belief of the fish eating it. I mean, it worked for Mr. Ping and his noodle shop, right? The difference is that it was used as a marketing gimmick to draw in customers. Mr. Krabs doesn't use the formula as a selling point directly, and most fish are ignorant or uncaring about the formula itself. The only one to obsess over it is Plankton, and the way both Krabs and Plankton treat the formula makes it very clear that it's not just a sales campaign. This is a recipe for a burger that is the only thing keeping Bikini Bottom from becoming a literal apocalypse. It's definitely real, though the power it holds is only felt by those familiar with it directly, but this theory is also debunked. Theory number 4. Regular show's setting is created by Pops and Anti-Pops. Imagine the whole universe, or at least the city part, being created by two omnipotent beings with extreme power. Then imagine that this park is used as a setting for wacky adventures that snowball from mundane tasks and improbable and insane scenarios. And you get this theory's premise. Regular show itself would wind up being the dual creation of Pops and Anti-Pops, two of the most powerful entities in the show's canon, whose fights have been known to outright destroy the universe, supposedly. In truth, it's possible that the show's point is that it's two all-powerful gods playing pretend with made-up scenarios. You have your non-human main cast of assorted oddballs, and with the number of human characters outside the park and the actual depth able to be counted on one hand, you have crazy events that come out of nowhere, often due to sheer absurdity. Lastly, you have the many times such events end abruptly with more of a few arbitrary explosions. Pops always has such a childish and naive mentality, so it's not above the realm of possibility he would do this. Anti-Pops would be harder to justify, given his more antagonist culture, but that could also be written off as him acting. Perhaps the series started off as some silly adventures, eventually boosting it up to the final season's events, as the two beings clash on what direction to take their pretend play, before reconciling to give everyone a happy ending. Overall, the theory has merit, and I can't find anything directly contradicting it, so I guess that's still in play. Now, this theory is from one of my favorite cartoons, Courage the Cowardly Dog, his world of imagination. This theory is honestly my favorite of the whole video, mostly because it just makes a lot of sense. Courage, the Cowardly Dog as a whole, from the monsters to the people, even to the setting itself, is all a warped perception of Courage's subconscious. The theory is that Courage, as a dog, has a limited idea of the world and can only see things related to that idea. Anything beyond his front door is foreign and scary to him. Those monsters that terrorize Eustace and Muriel and himself, probably something normal like a house guest or a mailman. The only consistencies for a dog are their immediate family, and everything else is just intruding on their world. In fact, the middle of nowhere is possibly just an analogy for how Courage's home is the center of the universe, all that matters then. He could actually be living in a modern suburb for all we know, and it wouldn't change a thing according to the theory. Hell, even the repeated dialogue throughout each episode and how they reuse the same exact vocal tracks for half a character's line could be further proof on this theory. How do you train a dog? Repetition. You say the same thing over and over and over again, and while they don't quite understand the words, they understand the meaning and what they represent. Courage probably hears the same thing so often, they're the words he understands. In truth, he could very well be the one of those small dogs that barks at literally everything in the neighborhood, terrified of his own shadow. This theory holds a lot of weight in my view. But this next theory in the show Ed, Edd and Eddy, that the cul-de-sac is actually Purgatory. Yeah, this theory claims that the assorted kids in the familiar cul-de-sac are in fact dead. A dark theory, but personifications of people that died in different eras, all mashed up together in one unmoving limbo. Honestly, I'm not too impressed with this. Let's put aside the needless bleakness this theory causes, like the first theory. On the merits alone, what do we suppose each character represents? The claim that the character Rolf was from the 1800s, a farmer killed by an animal? Okay, fair. Johnny is from the 1920s Depression era? Bit of a stretch, but okay. Eddie as a 1930s con artist? No. His room is filled with memorabilia of the 1970s, which is impossible to ignore. The theories already hit a brick wall right there, but let's go deeper. One common piece of evidence is that the lack of adults in the show, at least on screen, that they're still very much the presence of parents. Though, whether it's the cars they drive or the school they go to, the punishments they receive and the chores they're given, there's definitely a presence of a regular social life and family relations on a normal scale. If that's not enough, the inclusion of the movie's sudden 13th character, Eddie's brother, makes it blindly clear that the cul-de-sac is not only part part of the world around the cast, that there is more than just a tiny circle of lives there. But don't just take my word for it, take Danny Antonucci's, the creator's word. He described the show's creation as inspired from his own life and the friends he had as a childhood. He must have had a fun childhood. Inspired by real life experiences, his words. Not some sort of hypothetical purgatory, not the afterlife. Just a bunch of neighborhood kids doing neighborhood kid things, with a healthy dose of cartoon physics baked in. So I guess his childhood was filled of shoving jaws of jawbreakers and candy. But that's what it all boils down to. Theories or not, real or not, these are cartoons that push the boundaries of what's real, what's perceived, and what's actually happening. As long as people keep making cartoons, there'll always be fan theories about what's actually happening. Sure, I might not believe in many of these myself, but some of them can be fun to discuss with others. Isn't that the greatest kind of fan collaboration after all? But my friends, if you like this video, make sure to click the like button, subscribe, and leave a comment to let me know which of these you think is bullshit too.